or tailoring old clothes to make them more level, or for the knitters watching. Hey everyone, welcome back to Fashion Design with Hannah. If you haven't noticed in previous videos, I like to focus more on sustainable design practices, and considering as how it is currently Earth Month in the United States, I would love to help spread the word on how to be more sustainable in fashion design, both as an industry designer and as an independent designer. Part of my focus on it nowadays might be a little bit from guilt from working in the industry and knowing about the harmful effects the industry can have on the environment, but my roots from trying to be kind to the environment comes from learning to respect nature as a kid. And while I was learning at FIT, I didn't have much money, so I tried to make my supplies last as long as I possibly could. Before we get down and dirty into green practices for Earth Month and beyond, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you are new here. You can also follow me on Instagram, where I share more eco-friendly design methods, along with fashion inspiration, news, video updates, and more. Now let's get into the sustainability. Get your snacks and your drinks ready for method number 1, because this is the biggest key to sustainability in design, and what most people think of when they think of green fashion: the fibers and the fabrics. Obviously, man-made fibers are based out of synthetic materials, and they have such a long life that they might as well be considered forever fibers. However, that doesn't always have to be the case. There are researchers and developers out there that are already trying to do better for the world. One such company is Algae. They're developing durable yet rapidly degradable yarns from kelp, which is one of the most regenerative organisms on the planet. I actually went to FIT with one of the co-founders of Algae, and I couldn't be more blown away by their concept and development. And I can't wait to see them bring their fiber to market. Seeing as how Algae is still in the works, other materials you can look into are recycled fibers and fabrics. Recycled plastic products are cheaper to make than virgin plastic products, and taking that at face value, that's good for both the earth and for a company's bottom line. If you take a little closer look though, it does have some negative effects at the end of the apparel life cycle, but more on that later on. Therefore, another option would be to use plant-based fibers. Yes, they are more costly and could be harmful to the environment if heavy pesticides are used along with the crop transportation emissions. That is something both consumers and companies producing and selling apparel have to face. However, plant-based fibers can eventually break down, unlike their synthetic brethren. As nice it would be to just say, problem solved, all we have to do is switch to organic plant-based fibers. We would then be completely overlooking all of the material waste and harmful environmental effects that go on because of the fashion industry. What happens to all of the fabric remnants after the pattern pieces have been cut and the seams trimmed? What happens to all the dye that doesn't get used? And the two biggest questions: what happens to the clothing at the end of the season that doesn't get sold? And what happens when we are done with a piece of clothing in our wardrobe? I feel like we all know the answers at this point. Although small orders don't make as much money for large apparel companies, small batch orders and made-to-order processes are the best way to reduce material waste. There are plenty of companies that do this now, but you probably haven't heard of them because they're small. We humans tend to go for the easy route, and smaller brands are harder to find. But if you start looking or asking around, you'll find them. For designers that still want unique looking fabrics and need larger than scrap size cuts, check out Spoonflower. I'm not sponsored, however, I do love their business. You can either upload a print to be put on a range of fabric qualities, or you can choose a design that's already out on their design market and they'll print only what you need for your order. If you're also looking for a chance to get your own prints noticed and/or fund your custom fabric needs, they also host design challenges every month where you could win Spoonflower credit, and I may or may not have participated in them as well. That then begs the question, is there anything better we can do or use? Well, especially on a small scale, yes. Probably the most sustainable option we can do is use what has already been made. Whether it be supplementing your brand with thrifted clothes a la Urban Outfitters, making new clothes from old, tailoring old clothes to make them more lovable, or for the knitters watching, getting better and sometimes more unique yarns from old sweaters. One of my favorite places that I wish existed while I was learning fashion design is Fab Scrap, located in New York City, and with the recent announcement of an expansion into Philly, they literally pick up scrap yardage and trims from fashion companies both big and small. They then sort them out to either be recycled or resold, and then recycle and resell them. I absolutely adore them, and they are charities, so they do fundraising challenges as well. I will leave a link to my fundraiser once I have it finalized, and I will leave that in my Instagram as well. Please note that I will link websites and videos for all resources mentioned in the description box down below. Also, feel free to leave your favorite sustainable resources in the comments too, because sharing is caring. Now that we have the biggest method for becoming sustainable behind us, next up is number 2, the actual design. The literal shapes and sizes of the pattern pieces determine how much waste you end up with. I briefly touched on this in number 1, but the literal shapes and sizes of the pattern pieces determine how much waste you end up with. Fabric cutters in the industry automatically try and place the pattern pieces in the least waste producing way. That way it saves both time and money for both them and the brand that they are working for. Keep in mind that a circular pattern piece will always create more waste than a square because it's harder to use the leftover spaces around the circle for other pattern pieces, unless of course those pieces are literally reused as part of the design. Scraps can also be reused for other things on a small scale. However, factories will nearly always just throw them away, and that can easily add up. Next up are methods 3 through 6, and they're all very closely related to each other in terms of making a product more or less sustainable. Number 3 on the list is country or country of origins for every part of the garment. Not only is it a question of where does the fabric come from, but where do all the zippers, thread, buttons, and everything else involved come from? The United States only requires country of origin to be listed on clothing labels, which is where the apparel is produced, not where everything comes from. Though it does make more sense to have everything sourced within a reasonable distance of the factory producing the garments, that is not always possible. The transportation of the goods to get to the factories is the biggest factor here on whether or not it is eco-friendly. The same goes for number 4, which is the country of production. It would be best if the goods could be produced and sold in the same country, however, we all know money talks. If a company can find cheaper production in another country other than their own, they will look elsewhere. It's kind of a self-realizing problem where the production gets more expensive here, not just because of the higher wage minimums, but also because there are fewer skilled workers that are being trained because the demand for production in the US is low. And with less demand, that means factories will start to close, fewer skilled workers, higher prices, and it just keeps going into a negative feedback loop. The environment then gets hurt in the process of needing to transport the goods all over the world, especially in a time where fashion is global due to the rise of the internet making everything more accessible worldwide. This then ties in with number 5, the timeline of production. It can take longer to produce things in different countries than where they are sold when costing is critical. The cheapest and most carbon efficient method of transportation is by boat. However, as I'm sure most of you have heard recently, that's not always the easiest method. Looking at you, Suez Canal. Fashion design companies can have an uphill battle when it comes to working with private label customers. Some of the customers aren't always the best about responding to necessary design decisions either during the ordering process or after ordering. When design decisions are delayed, production is delayed. However, a lot of those same customers who are, when it comes to design decisions, still want their order with the same delivery date, or they cancel. That makes fashion design companies scramble to keep orders, and they end up air freighting the cargo to meet crazy deadlines. Air freighting cargo is not only a lot more expensive, but it ends up emitting up to 50 times more CO2 per 2 tons of cargo per mile. That then brings us to number 6, the countries where the final products are sold. For the US-based companies, they typically have their main warehouses in the US as well. When the goods reach their warehouses, they then do all of their final sorting and packaging. But what comes next? More shipping. If a retailer has stores and warehouses in other countries, then they'll have to have their products shipped once again around the world. Then they might ship to individual customers from there if the company takes online orders. I hear you thinking it. Yes, I did just list all the problems for 3 through 6 and not really give a solution, but that's because they all have a similar solution. Buy, make, and sell local whenever possible. Now, remember how I said there are some negative effects of recycled plastic products? Well, that brings us to the final method, number 7, of being more sustainable in fashion design: the apparel life cycle. As I was saying earlier, recycled plastic fibers can be used in apparel production. However, here's the catch. Recycled plastic apparel fibers cannot be recycled again, even though plastic bottles can be recycled into more plastic bottles a few times. So then it starts to feel a little bit like greenwashing when a company boasts about using recycled plastic fibers, as it only gets one more step further before going to the landfill. Yes, one step further is better, and keep in mind that some apparel products, like waterproof items, are difficult to achieve without plastics or plastic coatings at this time. But maybe one day we can get rid of plastic use altogether. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'm sure there are some sustainable design practices that I missed in the video, so feel free to add those in the comments down below, and don't forget to hit that like button for Mother Earth. And as always, take care, and I'll be seeing you here in the next video. Bye! Number 3. I feel like the most extreme narrator. The most extreme. Number 3.